Hello! Today's lesson is on the introduction to email or electronic mail. So we're going to talk about what email is, what email addresses are, and how people might choose email addresses. So you should have printed out your guided notes, and you'll see them here. You can follow along with your guided notes and fill in the blanks as we go along. So the first part of this lesson is what is electronic mail? And it's simply a method to send information that goes from one computer to another. And you have to use an email program or an email website, and that knows how to package your email and send it on its way through the internet to an email address that you specify. And because these messages are digital, they go almost instantaneously. Within a second or two, they're at their destination. So in order to send email to somebody, you need their email address. And so with an email address, just like a telephone number where you have to dial in the exact right telephone number to get to the person that you want, with an email address, you somebody has to have a unique address that no one else has. So it has to be completely unique. No two people can have the same email address, and that will make sure that your message gets directly to the person that you want to send it to. And that also means that you need to type in someone's email address exactly correctly. So spelling mistakes will cause your email message to not make it to the person you intend to get it to. So it might go to the wrong address, or it might actually bounce back to you saying that it can't find that person that you're trying to email. Well, what do email addresses look like? Well, email addresses always appear in this kind of configuration. The first part of the email address is the username. And so that is, the username is the name that uniquely identifies the person you're sending the email to. So we can write a username uniquely. That means no one else can have it. So it uniquely identifies the user or the person. The end of an email address is the domain name. And so the domain name is that part of the address that identifies the email provider, so the company or the organization that provides the email address. So it's the internet address. Of the email service provider. In between the username and the domain name is always this symbol, and it's called the @ symbol. And you access that symbol on your keyboard by holding down the Shift key and typing the number 2. And you'll notice above the keyboard, above the number 2, is the symbol, that @ symbol. This always has to separate the username and the domain name. Okay, so there are some rules for what an email address can look like. And these rules will help you identify whether you have somebody's email address correct or not. And will also help you if you have to create a new email account for yourself at any time. And the first rule of an email address is an email address can have no spaces. So you'll see the username, the domain name, and there will never be a space in any part of this address. There's no space around the symbol. There's no space between sections of the username. You'll never hit the space bar when typing an email address, so that's important. The second rule for email addresses is there's certain characters that are allowed for an email address, and usually other characters aren't permitted. So for example, things that are okay that you'll see in an email address are, of course, letters. You'll also see numbers. And you may see some punctuation or special characters like periods or dots. You may see dashes or like the minus sign. And you may see something called an underscore, which is just a line that appears at the base of the letters. So an underscore you get by holding down the shift key and hitting the dash key. And please be careful not to confuse the underscore for a space. It's definitely not a space. It is the underscore character. It's shift and the dash key. And usually most other punctuation aren't allowed in an email address. So if you see something with another punctuation mark in it, it probably isn't a correct email address. But letters, numbers, dots, dashes, underscores are usually okay in an email address. Okay, let's flip to the next page of the guided notes. And the third rule for email addresses is that they are not case sensitive. So that means that uppercase or capital letters or lowercase, they're both okay. And they're interchangeable. Well, what does that mean? It means that in an email address, they're treated the same. So if you type somebody's name in all capital letters, the email address is exactly the same as that email address with all lowercase letters. So it doesn't matter if you use an uppercase or lowercase, it's still the same email address. And that's good. It makes it a little bit more flexible when trying to type an email address to know that it doesn't matter if you have capital letters or lowercase letters. The fourth rule, I'm just going to flip this back up here so we can look at our example email address, is this @ symbol. It has to separate the username and the domain name. If you see an email address that doesn't have an @ symbol in it, then it's not an email address. So the @ symbol, it must separate the username and the domain name. So that's important. And then the last thing we already talked about is every email address, so the whole email address, username, @ domain name, that whole email address has to be unique. So only one person can have that particular email address. So no two people can have the same address. They all must be unique. Okay. So those are the basic rules for what email addresses look like.